Glory to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to another episode of City of Desert. And once again, we are picking up with our reading of the first volume of the Philokalia and the writings and the sayings of Evagrius of Pontus. And today we are on page 36 of his writings on asceticism and stillness. And we are picking up with paragraph 16, which is at the bottom of the page. So again, we are on 36 with paragraph 16. And it is here that Evagrius is going to speak to us about the Father's practice of fasting. And as I'm recording this, we are about to enter into the holy season of Lent, Great Lent, and to take up the fast of the Church. And but Evagrius gives us a deep insight into the Father's kind of fasting, which has been largely lost to the Church in modern times, and that is not meant for monks alone, but can be embraced certainly in great measure, even by those living within the world, and understanding that there is a regularity, a constancy to the practice of fasting in the spiritual life. It's not something that we are meant to do, but episodically, once a year, but is to be a constant fixture within this spiritual life. They understood how it shaped the mind and the heart, but also ordered the appetites. And so we pick up with paragraph 16, and Evagrius says, "Fast before the Lord according to your strength, for to do this will purge you from your iniquities and sins. It exalts the soul, sanctifies the mind, drives away the demons, and prepares you for God's presence. Having already eaten once, try not to eat a second time the same day, in case you become extravagant and disturb your mind. In this way, you will have the means for helping others and for mortifying the passions of your body. But if there is a meeting of the brethren and you have to eat a second and a third time, do not be disgruntled or surly. On the contrary, do gladly what you have to do, and when you have eaten a second or a third time, thank God that you have fulfilled the law of love, and that He Himself is providing for you. Also, there are occasions when, because of bodily sickness, you have to eat a second and a third time or more often. Do not be sad about this. When you are ill, you should modify your ascetic labors for the time being, so that you may regain the strength to take them up once more." Beautiful paragraph, and articulates so well the psychology and the spirituality of fasting, how it is that we are not only to practice, but the spirit with which we practice it, and also the spirit with which we let go of the discipline, the reasons that we would modify it, and the regularity of the practice. All of these come forward in one single paragraph from this great teacher. So this is a good one for us to hold on to write out for ourselves and to remember, especially during this time of the year. So fast according to your strength, first and foremost, that fasting cannot be taken up swiftly and too rigorously without harming the body. And so we understand our own strength or our own weakness. If we are taking up fasting for the first time, we do so modestly until physiologically our body begins to adjust to the lack of calories or the smaller amount of calories that we are taking in. And so fasting might begin slowly over the course of time with our letting go of one meal on one day. And we look at this as a kind of marathon in regards to spiritual practice, that we're not running a sprint, that we're thinking about things long term in regards to this specific practice, that in order for it to bear fruit, it must endure, and so must we. And so we take it up in a measured way under the counsel of an elder. And he says, to do this, we purge ourselves of iniquities and sins, exalt the soul, sanctify the mind, we drive away demons, and we are prepared for God's presence. So fasting, this humbling of the mind and the body, allows us then to order our appetites and our desires, especially those of a bodily nature. And we are again strengthening our will in taking up this discipline as well, not immediately responding to the demands of the flesh. And in doing all this, we overcome our iniquities, especially that of gluttony. And in overcoming gluttony, then we also can overcome and begin to overcome another bodily appetite, that of lust. And so this is no small exercise for the soul. He tells us it exalts us and sanctifies the mind, drives away the demons, and prepares us for God's presence. So not only does it free us from our iniquities, give us strength in regards to our own passions, but this humbling of the mind and the body through this practice drives away the prideful, the demons. And so this spiritual exercise for us becomes a kind of weapon in the spiritual battle that we take up. As we pray, we strengthen our prayer by allowing it to become not something that is abstract, but involving the full self, the whole body. And so we fast, and we fast regularly. And we are doing so, he tells us, not as simply a physical discipline, but or to overcome the passions, but to prepare ourselves for God's presence. When we empty ourselves, when we are not constantly filling ourselves with the things of this world, we are preparing the mind and the heart to receive He who is the bread of life, the one alone who can satisfy the deepest longings and desires of the human heart. And so we begin to associate with greater clarity the experience of that bodily hunger with our spiritual hunger, what we experience in the depths of our hearts, that longing, that hunger that only God can fill. And so the deeper our fasting becomes, then the deeper our longing for God becomes, as well as the deeper our prayer becomes. And so fasting or prayer without fasting is weak, the fathers would tell us. And so this is a way of strengthening our desire for God. So again, not an abstract discipline or a practice of physical endurance, but rather a practice of desire, of deepening our desire for God. He tells us that once we have eaten once, try not to eat a second time on the day. So he gives us an insight here into the regular fast of the monks, that they would eat once a day, late in the afternoon. And it was often right before the break of the fast that the prayer would become its deepest, as the body is humbled. More and more humbled, the deeper the prayer and the longing for God becomes. And so one would want to make the greatest use of that fasting regularly on a daily basis, but not extending it beyond that 24-hour period. So we do not fall into pride by the extension of this, making it an act of endurance. And we do not fall into sickness or weakness, where we cannot even fulfill our spiritual role by extending it beyond that 24-hour period. So once a day, he tells us. And beyond that, he says, having already eaten, though, if you are compelled to do so because of hospitality, you are invited by other monks or within the monastery to share a meal with them. Do not, he says, and the language that he uses is very important. He says, do not become surly about this. Uh, and do not become disgruntled. And so we are not to value the spiritual and the ascetical practice above hospitality and the love of others, that our receiving of this gift from another's hand and ultimately from God is to be received with joy and with peace of mind and heart. The next day, we will be able to step right back into our fasting. Again, if we take that sense of it being a marathon, not a sprint. And so, not to treat the fasting as an end in itself and grow angry if you are compelled to step out of your discipline for the sake of love and charity. And he says, even if you have to do this multiple times during the day, simply to thank God for providing for your needs. That God knows best what are the needs of our bodies and might put us in situations where we are compelled to break our fast because God knows that for one reason or another that we need this in order to persevere, for example, throughout the entire discipline of the Great Lent. That there might be reasons that God leads us to break that fast in order that we might not grow weak or ill. Uh, on occasions, he says, of illness, of bodily sickness, eat a second, third time, or even more often. That we do not want to lose our health and to lose it in such a way that we are incapable then of fulfilling our spiritual disciplines for a long period of time, or even permanently because we've wounded the body, we've made ourselves so sick. And so when you are sick, eat as much as is needed for your regaining of your physical health. And he says again, do not be sad about this, but modify the ascetic behaviors for the time being, so that you may regain your strength to take them up once again. So Evagrius, like the other desert fathers, takes this longer view of the formation of mind and heart, the ordering of the appetites and the desires toward God, that one has to step into this fully, but with wisdom, understanding the meaning of asceticism so that it does not become an end in itself, that it becomes a reflection of our desire for God. And so the monks would come to the point of loving fasting because they understood that it did bring this humility to the mind and the body, that it did increase their desire for prayer, that it would help to still the mind, the thoughts that rush upon us throughout the course of the day would begin to slow down. But also the body not engaged in digesting multiple meals also becomes sharpened. The mind becomes sharpened and more attentive to the things of God. At one point here, he mentions that our eating this once a day, one time a day, not only frees us and helps to free us from the passions, but he says it also helps us to help others. And we often lose sight of this, that our fasting, beyond what I've spoken about here so far, also helps us to take up another discipline, that is almsgiving, that we are able to provide for others out of our abundance because we are only eating one meal a day. We are going through less food, which means that we are able to share our food with others, or the money that would typically be spent in purchasing food. We are able to share these things with others who find themselves in great want. And often, I think monasteries, as well as Christians in general, have lost sight of this, that the abundance of food with which we surround ourselves, the multiple meals that we are taught to have every day, as well as the kind of grazing that we do within the kitchen, often makes us lose sight of this spiritual practice. And in the end, makes it very difficult when we try to take it up during holy seasons, such as the Great Lent. And so let us pray today that our eyes would be open to the beauty of the practice of fasting, that we, like the fathers, would not only come to integrate it into our life regularly, but come to love it, and love it because it opens up that space for the presence of God and for the deepening of prayer, that it creates a greater desire in our heart for the beloved. Thank you once again for joining me, and know that I pray for you, and have a wonderful day.